So, can you just talk briefly about um, how you started doing this work and what you were doing before this? What led you to become a communicator?
Yeah, I guess the place to start would be in my early life. Like many of us, my closest friends and companions as a child were animals, and they were not just family members, friends, but they were also beings who supported me and in certain ways saved me during some very difficult times in my early life. And they were always a part of my world. At a certain point, I realized that, like many children do, who have these deep connections and easy communication and connection with animals and trees and plants and all of the beings, that this wasn't necessarily something that was common or something, at least in my generation, that we could talk about freely with adults without being shut down or told it was just our imagination or all the things, right? And so I also was a musician and ended up taking that path in my professional life, studying classical music and teaching and performing. And at a certain point, I well, I adopted my first dog as an adult, and that's really where it kind of all started. Because I started to volunteer. I was just finishing graduate school. It was difficult. It was a hard time in my life, and I started to volunteer at the shelter that I had adopted him from. And this would have been in the late, let me think, early 90s, I guess. And there was an animal communicator who happened to volunteer at the shelter. And I met her and I watched her work, and it just opened the door back up for me of, oh, I remember this. I remember what this is. Oh, and she happened to live in my neighborhood, and so we became friends. And she worked with my animals, and that's really what started it again for me. And so that turned into a period of time in my life where I was working as a professional musician and a teacher and a professor and all of the things in that academic world. But I also had animal companions in my own family. And then I did a lot of volunteer work with shelters and rescues. And at the same time, then tried to learn and study everything that I could that was available about this animal communication thing. And there, so I read everything that was available at the time. And then at a certain point, it became clear to me that the animals were really pushing me and pulling me into deeper formal study. And so I began a period of training time then. While I was still working as a musician, but I was also doing animal communication training and practicing. And I never really imagined that it would become a second career. But at a certain point, as these things do, spirit and the animals just kind of moved me from out of the music world and into the animal communication world. And the practice just started growing, and it was clear to me that this was really where my heart was. And so that's kind of the abbreviated version of it. But that was, all of that began in the early 2000s. And so I've been working professionally now for, let's see, coming on close to 20 years, a little bit shy of 20 years at this point. So.